Ladies and gentlemen, there are films about addiction, there are films about disability, and there are films about loss. But Sound of Metal isn't really any of those. It starts in a place we recognize noise, music, performance, identity built through sound, and then slowly removes the very thing the audience relies on to interpret emotion. And what's left is not emptiness, it's confrontation. Because what the film ultimately asks is not what happens when you lose your hearing, but something far more uncomfortable. Who are you when you can no longer control how you experience the world? Directed by Darius Marder, Sound of Metal follows Ruben, a drummer whose life collapses when he rapidly loses his hearing. But the real story isn't about hearing loss, it's about resistance and the violent emotional cost of refusing to accept change. Ruben, played by Riz Ahmed, is introduced not just as a musician but as someone whose identity is fused to sensory experience. He doesn't just play music, he inhabits it. The drums are not a job, they are structure, they control, they are emotional regulation. So when the hearing loss begins, it's not just a medical condition, it's an identity collapse. And what makes Ruben such a compelling character is that he doesn't initially respond with acceptance, grief, or even fear in the traditional sense. He responds with denial framed as urgency. He treats the problem like something that can be fixed before it interrupts his life too much, something along the lines of a minor inconvenience. That distinction matters because Ruben is not just losing hearing, he's losing the system that tells him who he is. And instead of adapting, he tries to restore the old system at all costs. This is where addiction becomes the film's deeper metaphor. Not just addiction to substances, but addiction to identity. The refusal to let go of the former self, even when it is actively harming the present one. Lou, played by Olivia Cook, is often misread as simply the partner trying to help, but her role is far more complicated. Lou is not a stable support, she's shared instability. Both she and Ruben are recovering addicts. Their relationship is built on mutual dependence disguised as love, and that's why their dynamic collapses so violently when Ruben begins losing his hearing. Because Lou is forced into a situation she's not equipped for emotionally, being the stable one, and she cannot sustain it. What makes Lou tragic isn't cruelty, it's limitation. She loves Ruben, but she also fears becoming responsible for his destruction. So her solution is withdrawal, disguised as care. She places him in the deaf community home, believing structure will save him. But underneath that decision is something far more uncomfortable. She's trying to survive him. And the contradiction sits at the core of her character. She wants to help him heal, but she also wants to escape that version of him that demands constant emotional rescue. It's exhausting for her, and honestly, I understand it. That tension is what makes her leaving rather inevitable rather than shocking. When Ruben arrives at the deaf community home, the film shifts tone completely. It introduces Joe, played by Paul Rossi, and a community that operates with a completely different philosophy of existence. Joe is not positioned as a mentor in a traditional cinematic sense. He is not there to fix Ruben, he is there to remove the idea that Ruben needs fixing in the way that he believes. The community is not framed as inspirational. It is structured, intentional, self-contained. And this is where the film does something very important. It rejects the idea that silence is lost. Instead, it reframes silence as a language, not absence but difference. And Ruben cannot process that, because accepting that idea would require him to accept that his previous life is gone, not paused, not delayed, gone. Joe's philosophy is simple but brutal. You do not return to who you were, you become someone else, and Ruben resists this completely, not because he doesn't understand it intellectually, but because emotionally it means surrender, and Ruben is addicted to control. Even here, in a place designed for adaptation, he searches for a way to restore what he lost. One of the most overlooked aspects of Sound of Metal is how it reframes addiction. Ruben is a recovering addict, but the film suggests something more subtle. He has not actually left the addiction behind, he has only changed its objective. At first it was heroin, now it's hearing. Or more precisely, the idea that his life only has meaning if it returns to its previous form. That belief becomes compulsive, and it isolates him more effectively than drugs ever did. Because now his addiction is socially invisible. No one can detox him from wanting his old life back, and that makes it more dangerous. Every attempt at healing becomes something he rejects if it does not restore what he had, Even when people around him offer stability, community, and structure, he interprets it as restriction. This is where the film becomes less about disability and more about psychological rigidity. Ruben is not unable to adapt, he is unwilling to let go of control long enough to learn how. The emotional center of the film is not Ruben alone, it's the collapse of Ruben and Lou as a system. Their love is real, but it's also unstable by design because it's built on a shared avoidance. When Ruben can no longer participate in their old life, their imbalance becomes visible, and Lou cannot carry both of them, so she makes a decision that feels both compassionate and self-preserving. She leaves, but the film doesn't frame it as this betrayal, it frames it as inevitability. Because love that is built on mutual survival rather than mutual growth cannot survive a fundamental change in conditions. Ruben's reaction is not just a heartbreak, it's destabilization, because now he's forced to confront something that he's been avoiding. There is no version of the past that he can return to, and no person who can carry him back into it. The sound design in Sound of Metal is not just technical, it's experiential storytelling. There are moments where audio drops or shifts into muffled distortion, placing the viewer directly into Ruben's sensory experience. But the key point is this: the film does not use silence as absence, it uses it as presence. You are not being shown what Ruben loses, and the soundtrack, when it appears, is used sparingly. It is not emotional manipulation, it is contrast, a reminder of what Ruben can no longer access reliably. The final moments of the film is not about recovery, it's about acceptance without restoration. Ruben does not get his hearing back, he does not return to his previous identity, and the film refuses to offer him a symbolic replacement for what he lost. Instead, it offers him something more difficult: stillness and a choice. For the first time, Ruben is not reacting, he's not resisting, he's listening, not with ears, but with attention. And that distinction is the entire thesis of the film, because Sound of Metal is not about the loss of sound, it's about the end of denial and what remains when identity is no longer tied to what you used to be. The final question it leaves with you is not how does someone live without hearing, but what happens when you stop demanding that life return to the way it was. And Ruben's journey makes one thing painfully clear: healing does not always look like recovery. Sometimes it looks like surrender, not defeat but recognition that you are not owed your former self.